NewYorker.com editor and CBS News contributor Nick Thompson is here with us to break this down. So, Nick, today the New York Times and Forbes.com both called the response from the tech world muted. And they carefully crafted and coordinated. So what do you think about that?
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. One, there have been some tech companies that have backed Apple. There have been others who've been a little more cautious. Why have they been more cautious? Well, one, nobody wants to look like they're supporting terrorists, right? That's a bad PR position to be in. Two, facts are really complicated. Tech companies probably really want to try to figure it out. Three, Apple's stance is kind of complicated, and maybe we shouldn't support it. And four, all the other tech companies have big contracts with the government, so they probably don't want to antagonize the government. So lots of complicated things going on.
Has Apple been more cooperative in the past?
Apple has definitely been more cooperative in the past. There have been lots of cases where Apple has allowed the government to get into phones, get access off of phones. They've complied with court orders in the past. Now, what's different, though, is that Apple's new software means that in order for the FBI to get access to this terrorist phone, it's not just about Apple like giving them a key or giving them a code or handing over the data. It's about Apple actually constructing something from scratch that would allow the FBI to get into the phone. So Apple says, hey, this case is different. So in all those other cases where they didn't have to create code from scratch, they've been much more compliant. Now they're saying, we're taking this principled stand in part because you're asking us to build malware.
So how about the argument that it's not just that because of the technology, this case is different, but maybe public sentiment is different, and maybe they're being more challenging now because, you know, after Edward Snowden, the conversation about our privacy, maybe they think their customers wouldn't take too kindly to them being too cooperative with the government.
Right. So there are a couple things that have happened in the last few years. One, there's the Edward Snowden revelations, which made Apple so mad at the government. They said, what? You're doing all this, and also turned the public against the government to a certain degree. That was a big thing. Then there was the Jennifer Lawrence hack, right? And Apple was exposed as making its data available to hackers and to the public. So they made a lot of changes since then. They are trying to sell themselves as a secure company. However, if this is a public relations battle and Apple is thinking about public relations, they are crazy to take the side of a terrorist whose wife pledged allegiance to ISIS.
But the question I think a lot of consumers are going to have is, what does this mean for me? We've seen people going to some of the Apple stores, locations, in support, it would seem, of Apple's decision to take this all the way to the Supreme Court, as they said they might. And that's because I think a lot of people are worried. You know, you make one exception here and everybody gets it. Terrorism, we've got to fight them. We've got to know who they were talking to, what they were doing. But then now the FBI comes back a month later or a year later and says, yeah, you know, I want to check this guy's phone or this woman's phone because we think that there may be something to that. It's a slippery slope. It's going to be very interesting to see how public sentiment plays out. I think there are absolutely some people like that who say, you know what, we've got to protect everybody's rights. In this case, by the way, a side note, the phone didn't actually belong to the terrorist. It belonged to his employer, the county. So they're not actually protecting his rights. They're refusing the county to get into its own phone. So Apple has a little less ground on the sort of individual privacy. But back to your question, yeah, there are people who think Apple should take the stand in support of all their customers, protect everything. But I think you're also going to see some people who are saying, Apple, come on, right? We've heard some anecdotal evidence of people saying, I don't want to use an iPhone anymore. I can't believe that this company isn't cooperating in the worst possible case where they should cooperate.
You know, Vlad, you brought this up yesterday. We're talking about Apple, but there are all kinds of companies that make phones. You know, there are Android phones out there. You talked about phones that where the company is not based in the U.S., maybe based somewhere else. What does this mean for our phones in general? Some experts say that there are more vulnerabilities in some of the Android phones.
There probably are more vulnerabilities in the Android phones. There's been a huge change, though, in the last 2 years or so, where basically the phones have gone from very easy to get information to the government to incredibly hard. And that was a big change and a big policy change on the part of first Apple and then on Google, which happened about a year and a half ago in the fall of, I guess, the fall of 2014. So there's been a huge shift. What does it mean to the market going forward? I don't know. There are really only two phone companies that provide software, Google and Apple. They're both taking a hardline stance here, so I don't think it changes it a ton.
Nick, let me ask you a question as it relates to politics. Yesterday, there was a Republican town hall. Ben Carson and Senator Ted Cruz said that while they respect the privacy of individuals, they're urging Apple to work with the FBI. Marco Rubio seemed to hedge his bets a little. It's interesting, is it not, to you, you've talked politics here at CBSN with us, that sometimes the Republicans who always seem sort of pro-business are now sort of taking the side of invasion of privacy, which is what some people say this is all about. What do you make of that?
It's a really hard issue because you have two principles where Republicans typically will have one side, right? You have the libertarian side saying the government should stay out, we should have maximum privacy protections, but you also have the law and order side, which is, you know, we need to stop terror. We need to use every tool at our disposal to stop people from coming in and, you know, shooting up office parties.
Right.
So those two things go against each other. I think politically, if I was advising a Republican candidate in this primary, I would take the side of the FBI, not the side of Apple.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Very interesting stuff. It's a delicate dance.
That's right.
Yeah.
CBS News contributor and NewYorker.com editor Nick Thompson, thanks a lot.
Thank you.